My name is Sue Ran. I woke up with a gasp, the phantom pain of a zombie king's claws still tearing at my chest. But there was no smell of blood, only the soft warmth of my blanket. I checked my phone. June 15th, 2024. I have been reborn for a third time, exactly 1 month before the world ends. In my previous lives, I failed. First, I was unprepared despite gaining a storage ability. In the second, I tried to survive alone in a private fortress, only to be killed after 10 years of misery. This time, everything is different. My storage space has evolved. It is no longer limited to a small room. It is now infinite, and time stands still inside it, meaning supplies never spoil. I realize that individual strength is useless against a global collapse. I cannot save the world as a lone wolf, but I can guide the nation to save itself. I decided to hand over my secret to the government. I called the police and reported the upcoming apocalypse. To prove I wasn't crazy, I gave them top-secret information about a future military exercise that only high-ranking officials could know. Within an hour, a tactical team, led by Li Guodong from National Security, surrounded my home. I went with them calmly. In the interrogation room, they treated me like a spy or a madman, but I stood my ground. I told them about the red rain coming on July 15th that will turn 70% of humanity into monsters. I even mentioned personal details about Li's daughter to shake his disbelief. To provide final proof, we went to a training ground. In front of dozens of armed officers, I used my power to make a 6-ton armored vehicle vanish instantly and then brought it back. The shock was total. My goal is simple. I want to meet the highest authority. I don't want to hide in a hole. I want to help the country hoard millions of tons of grain, machinery, and weapons. With my infinite space and the power of the state, we won't just survive the end of the world, we will fight back. I stood before a heavy 6-8-ton armored vehicle, feeling the cold steel beneath my hand. In my past life, these machines were useless against mutated monsters, but today, this vehicle was my ticket to earning the government's trust. With a single thought, I locked onto the target and commanded my space to contain it. In an instant, the massive beast vanished, leaving only an empty stretch of concrete and a crowd of shocked Special Forces officers. When I brought it back a second later, the disbelief in Li Guodong's eyes turned into pure awe. I told him this was just the beginning. If the nation gave me the authority, I could store anything, from grain warehouses to nuclear aircraft carriers. Li Guodong immediately took me to a high-level, silent room for a professional evaluation. I sat calmly as Professor Chen Wang, a top psychologist, tried to probe my mind. I didn't flinch. I told them my space was like an infinite black hole that could store anything except living creatures. When they hooked me up to a lie detector, the results were impossible. My heart rate and blood pressure remained perfectly steady, even when I spoke about the end of the world. I admitted my true purpose was to use the nation's resources to help as many people survive as possible. The machine showed I was telling the absolute truth. To provide final, undeniable proof, I gave them a specific prophecy. I told them that in exactly 1 hour, a top scientist at the Jiuquan Space Center would collapse from a heart attack. Li Guodong gambled everything on my word and called for a top-level alert. When the news came back that the scientist had indeed collapsed and was only saved because doctors were already waiting, the room fell into a deathly silence. My status changed instantly from a suspect to the nation's only hope. Li Guodong picked up the highest-level encrypted phone to call the chief, demanding the immediate activation of the National Emergency Plan. Physics as they knew it no longer mattered. The prophecy was real. I went with Li Guodong to Institute 01, a secret lab deep underground. He told me that before I could meet the big leaders, a real scientist had to check my powers. I met Wei Jiangwo, a famous physicist who thought my story was total nonsense. He shouted that science doesn't work like magic, but I didn't mind. I just walked up to a cup of hot water and made it vanish. When I brought the cup back 10 minutes later, the water was still boiling hot. The professor was shocked. In a normal room, it should have cooled down. He realized that inside my space, time stands still. It doesn't follow the laws of physics. This means I can keep food and supplies fresh forever without needing refrigerators or chemicals. We did more tests. I showed him that I can store plants and viruses, but I cannot store living animals like mice because they have a mind of their own. I also showed them I can make hundreds of tons of water disappear just by looking at it. By the end, the professor told Li Guodong that I am like a Noah's Ark for the country. Later, a big meeting was held with military leaders. They watched videos of me and couldn't explain how I do what I do. The top leader, Chu Shanha, decided to believe me. He said the nation has survived for 5,000 years and will survive this too. He ordered the start of a top-secret plan called Peach Blossom Spring. I was made a special advisor with the power to move all the nation's resources into my space. I went to a huge grain storage area. Li Guodong was worried because moving millions of tons of grain usually takes weeks. I just smiled. I touched the massive silos, and one by one, they vanished. In 5 minutes, a whole mountain of grain was safe inside me. For the first time, the leaders didn't look afraid of the future. They looked ready to fight. I stood before the leaders of the nation, my face calm on their giant screens. They questioned why we had to move everything now instead of just building walls. I explained the grim reality I lived through. The red rain makes no exceptions. In 1 month, our cities will fall in days, and our current warehouses will become death zones overrun by monsters. To save civilization, we must build underground and move every grain of wheat and every bullet into my infinite space where the virus cannot reach. The room went silent before the top commander made his choice. He bet everything on me. He triggered the highest emergency plan, Peach Blossom Spring, giving me total control over the nation's reserves. I was no longer just a survivor. I was the special advisor holding the key to our future. 3 hours later, I arrived at a massive grain reserve. The silos looked like mountains, holding millions of tons of food. Li Guodong, now in combat gear, was skeptical. He told me that even with trains, moving this much would take days. I just smiled. I walked up to the first giant steel tower and placed my hand on its cold surface. I locked my mind onto the target and gave the command to contain it. There was a loud boom as the air rushed into the empty space where the silo once stood. In an instant, it was gone. I didn't stop. I walked through the yard, touching tower after tower. One by one, they vanished into the void of my mind. In only 5 minutes, the entire complex was an empty field of concrete and dust. 150,000 tons of grain were now safe inside me. The soldiers stood frozen, their mouths open in shock. Li Guodong looked at the empty horizon, and I could see the fear in his eyes turn into hope. I brushed the dust off my hands, looked at the setting sun, and asked for the next location. We aren't just hiding from the end of the world anymore. We are preparing to fight back. Li Guodong snapped to attention and gave a sharp salute, his voice hoarse but strong. Advisor Su. That was storage area number 1. There are still areas 2 through 10 behind it. Also, there's a message from the Ministry of Defense. Li Guodong's eyes burned with excitement as he stared at Su Ran. The complete J-20 production line, along with the matching ammunition depot, is ready for transport. They're asking, can we fit it all? Su Ran's lips curved into a confident smile, his eyes shining with ambition. Tell them this. No matter how big it is, bring it all. Not just the J-20s. Anyone or anything that helps protect our people. I'll make room for it. Once we finish loading the food supplies, our next stop is the military factory. The night was dark as ink, and the beams of searchlights crossed over the factory, lighting the entire area as bright as day. This was one of the hearts of the Republic's aviation industry, the final assembly workshop of the J-20 Mighty Dragon fighter jet. At this moment, the usually heavily guarded facility was surrounded by 3 layers of security lines. Armed soldiers stood watch every few steps, and the atmosphere was tense and solemn. Report. Dragon's Nest has been completely cleared. All engineers have been evacuated to the safe zone. Report. Thunderbolt Ammunition Depot is ready for transport. Li Guodong put down his radio and quickly walked to Su Ran's side, his excitement almost overflowing. After leaving the grain depot, they had rushed straight here. Advisor Su, ahead is the J-20 assembly line, codenamed Dragon's Nest. Li Guodong lowered his voice, filled with pride and excitement. It's 1.5 kilometers long and contains tens of thousands of precision components. It's one of our greatest industrial achievements. Su Ran looked in the direction he pointed. The massive factory stood like a sleeping steel giant, radiating a powerful sense of industrial strength even from afar. In his previous life, after humanity retreated underground, they could no longer build a complete fifth-generation fighter jet. The skies had become the domain of mutated birds. But this time, he would take the mighty dragon and its nest with him. That one over there, Su Ran pointed to a semi-underground structure nearby. Is that the ammunition depot? Yes. Li Guodong nodded firmly. Codenamed Thunderbolt. It holds enough missiles and special munitions to equip 3 air regiments. The higher-ups said, take as much as we can. How much should we take? Su Ran smiled, a hint of madness and dominance unique to the end times flashing in his expression. In my dictionary, there's no such word as how much. There's only everything. Before his words faded, he was already striding toward the massive assembly workshop. The soldiers and technicians nearby had already received the highest order. They knew something beyond understanding was about to happen. Yet when they saw Su Ran in person, their eyes were still filled with curiosity and doubt. This young man was going to take away an entire production line. This wasn't a science fiction movie. It was real life. Ignoring all the stares, Su Ran walked straight to the thick alloy gate of the dragon's nest. He placed his palm gently on the cold metal. A low hum echoed. An invisible wave spread out from him in an instant. His mental power flowed like liquid silver, surging into the vast factory through the alloy gate. Complex robotic arms, precise conveyor belts, tens of thousands of sensors and tool modules, every of the 5-kilometer-long production line was clearly marked and locked in his mind. Target locked. J-20 final assembly line. Integrity, 100%. Begin containment. In the depths of Su Ran's eyes, it was as if stars were fading away. Collect. There was no thunderous explosion, no dazzling special effects. Under hundreds of watching eyes, the enormous factory, large enough to cover several football fields, along with everything inside it, began to fade from the center outward, as if erased by an invisible hand, and then vanished into thin air. A deep rumble followed. As the factory disappeared, the air inside burst outward violently, creating a powerful shockwave that lifted clouds of dust into the sky. All that remained was a vast, empty foundation that made one's heart tremble. Silence. The entire military complex was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone stood frozen, their faces filled with disbelief, unable to move a muscle. A major on guard duty dropped his binoculars with a sharp clack, but he didn't even notice. He muttered to himself, "No, it's not an illusion. It's really gone." Although Li Guodong had already witnessed a mountain move once before, seeing the dragon's nest vanish still made his heart tighten as if gripped by an invisible hand, leaving him almost breathless. It's not over yet. Su Ran's calm voice snapped everyone out of their shock. He turned and walked toward the nearby Thunderbolt ammunition depot. It was a semi-permanent underground facility, its entrance sealed by layers of thick concrete and steel, strong enough to withstand a direct hit from a bunker-buster bomb. Su Ran didn't even approach it. He simply stood about 50 meters away, raised his hand, and aimed at the seemingly indestructible fortress. Since it's an ammunition depot, let's take it too. A low hum filled the air. His mental power pierced through the heavy soil and concrete, covering the entire underground structure. Rows of neatly stacked missiles, bombs gleaming with a cold metallic light. Even the shelves and transport rails, all were locked in place. Collect. A deep, muffled boom followed, and the ground shook violently. The solid underground fortress, along with the land above it, seemed to be scooped out by an invisible giant hand. Before their eyes appeared a massive pit, dozens of meters deep, its edges smooth as glass. At the bottom, nothing. Someone swallowed hard. If taking away a production line was shocking, then removing an entire underground fortress from afar was pure terror. Everyone looked at Su Ran differently now. Curiosity and doubt had turned into awe and even fear. Su Ran lowered his hand and looked around, taking in every expression. "Team Leader Lee," he said calmly, as if he had done something trivial. "Report it. Tell command that all the nation's key assets have been secured. We can move to the next location." Li Guodong shuddered and quickly came back to his senses. He looked at Su Ran's young yet world-weary face, and his respect reached its peak. He nodded firmly, his trembling hand taking out the red, encrypted phone. This time, his voice carried not only hoarseness and excitement, but also the awe of witnessing history. Reporting to the Peach Blossom Haven Command Center. Reporting to the chief. Dragon's Nest is secured. Thunderbolt is cleared. Advisor Su asks. Li Guodong took a deep breath and shouted with all his strength. Who do we move next? Time. Apocalypse Countdown, Day 27. The night was as dark as ink, covering the underground command center of the North China military region. Once the highest wartime command post, it had now become the heart of the Peach Blossom Haven project. On the huge electronic screen, the red data glowed sharply. The air was thick with the smell of tobacco, the scent of dozens of leaders who had worked non-stop for 72 hours. Report the results. The elder at the head of the table tapped lightly on the desk. His voice was calm, but carried authority. Report. Li Guodong stood up abruptly, his eyes bloodshot, his voice trembling with excitement. As of 1 hour ago, all 5 strategic grain depots, 3 frozen meat reserves, and 12 military supply warehouses have been completely cleared. A collective gasp filled the room. Although these numbers had already been shared through encrypted channels, hearing them announced in person by the top leadership still carried a powerful impact. At the same time, with Comrade Su Ran's assistance, we successfully relocated dozens of key national industrial assets, including the J-20 production line, core components of the electromagnetic catapult system, and several heavy machinery production lines. Li Guodong continued, his tone filled with barely contained excitement. Impressive. An old general couldn't help slapping his thigh. In just 3 days, we've practically packed up 1/5 of our entire arsenal. Ahem. A sudden cough broke the heated atmosphere. At the far end of the long table, a middle-aged man with slicked-back hair and gold-rimmed glasses slowly adjusted his frames. Chen Jiangwo, Deputy Director of the National Development and Reform Commission, the man in charge of material allocation and logistics. Chief, Chen Jiangwo's tone was calm, but carried a hint of arrogance. I don't deny that the efficiency is impressive, but aren't we being too impulsive? The room fell silent. Colleagues, I admit that Comrade Su Ran's abilities are remarkable, but in the past 3 days, we've used nearly 1/10 of the nation's military forces for protection and clearance, consuming an astronomical amount of resources. More importantly, we've been transferring supplies with almost no cover. He looked at Su Ran, unable to hide the arrogance in his eyes. Comrade Su Ran, the apocalypse you speak of is still just a story. Our country's development follows strict scientific planning. I don't agree that we should risk the nation's future based on one young man's prediction. Chen Jiangwo's tone hardened. And what if this so-called spatial ability has side effects we don't know about? Or worse, what if he takes these national assets and disappears? A young man who hasn't even completed his background check now holds the highest authority over resource distribution. This is a huge risk. The meeting room went completely silent. Chen Jiangwo's words had pushed Su Ran into the center of controversy. He wasn't questioning Su Ran's ability, but his motives and loyalty. Bang! Li Guodong slammed the table and stood up, eyes blazing. Director Chen, what do you mean by that? Comrade Su Ran offered his ability to the country, and you're here talking nonsense. Old Li, sit down. The elder's voice was low but firm, his gaze still fixed on Chen Jiangwo. I'm talking about proper procedure. Chen Jiangwo sneered. I suggest we immediately form an expert team to conduct a full risk assessment on Su Ran. Until the results are out, all actions should be suspended, and his authority over resources should be withdrawn and handed to a more professional team. Su Ran said nothing. He simply looked at Chen Jiangwo, his eyes calm and unreadable. Withdraw his authority? There were only 27 days left before the apocalypse, and they still wanted to follow procedure? Su Ran smiled. He didn't even glance at Chen Jiangwo again. Instead, he slowly stood up and walked to the large bulletproof window. Director Chen, you think I'm just telling stories? Chen Jiangwo gave a cold laugh. Comrade Su Ran, national affairs are not a game. We can't let an unverified prophecy throw the country into panic and cause unnecessary losses. Losses? A cold light flashed in Su Ran's eyes as he pointed toward the window. License plate Jing A. 20247. That's the newest batch of special alloy plates, headed to the military factory for tank armor. Everyone instinctively looked outside. A heavy transport truck rumbled past. Even through the thick glass, the ground seemed to tremble. Su Ran's gaze turned icy. He placed his right hand lightly on the glass, as if he could choke the steel giant beyond it. Director Chun, give me a scientific assessment now. Retrieve. Boom. A deep explosion shook the entire meeting room, making the glass tremble. Outside, the massive transport truck, along with its full load of alloy plates, vanished from sight in an instant. It was as if it had been erased from existence, leaving only 2 clear tire marks and a cloud of dust swirling in the air. The meeting room fell silent. Everyone was frozen, even the senior official at the head of the table. Seeing is believing. It was the first time any of them had witnessed Su Ran's power in person. Looking at the empty street outside, then at Su Ran's calm, expressionless face, their understanding of the world was shaken to its core. Chen Jiangwo collapsed into his chair, his face pale and drenched in cold sweat. He couldn't comprehend what he had just seen. Director Chen, tell me, how should my ability be evaluated? Su Ran lowered his hand, his voice carrying an undeniable authority. Everyone, the world is about to change. We're running out of time. The elder suddenly stood up. His sharp gaze swept across the room before settling on Chen Jiangwo. Comrade Chen Jiangwo, I've heard your doubts. Now you've seen it for yourself. The world is no longer the same. His voice was low but firm, every word filled with power. The interests of the nation come before all else. At this moment, any selfish thoughts or actions that endanger our country will face the harshest punishment. He turned to Su Ran, his eyes full of trust and determination. Comrade Su Ran, your authority remains the highest. Continue all operations as planned. Yes, sir. Li Guodong answered loudly, his eyes filled with admiration and excitement as he looked at Su Ran. Su Ran nodded. He knew that this battle was his victory. Seeing is believing. The live demonstration had silenced all the doubters, leaving them speechless in awe. Commander, I have one more request. Without giving anyone a chance to rest, Su Ran dropped another bombshell. I need the blueprints for the national underground pipelines, air raid shelters, and large underground projects. Also, I need detailed population maps down to each town. What do you plan to do with them? The elder asked. The surface is only the first battlefield. Su Ran paused, his eyes shining with determination. These underground spaces will become humanity's final strongholds. We must plan and rebuild them in advance, turning them into a true underground Great Wall. Good. The elders slammed the table. Make it happen immediately. All departments must fully cooperate with advisor Su Ran. Su Ran turned to look out the window again. The night was deep and silent. He knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge was still ahead. The end of the world isn't just about the infected. He thought quietly. In his memories of his previous life, there were not only the infected, but also terrifying extreme weather and the darker side of human nature that emerged in chaos. Team Leader Lee, we need to speed up the transfer of supplies, Su Ran said seriously. The reactor cores, generator units, anything that can produce power, I want it all. In the end times, that will be the last spark of human civilization. Li Guodong trembled slightly. He understood what that meant. It was like taking out the very heart and lungs of the nation. Understood, he replied firmly, without a trace of hesitation. Outside the meeting room, the night wind howled. The true national battle had just begun. After the strategic meeting, the entire state machinery began to operate at an unprecedented speed. Su Ran's position was now completely secure. No one dared to question him anymore. But before the victory could even be celebrated, the countdown to the end had already begun. Time, Apocalypse Countdown, Day 26. Consultant Su. This is the map and detailed data of all nuclear power plants across the country. A huge holographic map unfolded before Su Ran, filled with countless glowing dots marking the locations of each nuclear plant. Li Guodong pointed at the map, his expression serious. The reactor cores are the most critical parts. But their structures are complex, radiation levels are high, and dismantling or transporting them is extremely difficult and dangerous. I know. Su Ran focused on one of the glowing dots, a large nuclear power plant on the eastern coast. We don't have time for standard dismantling. We'll have to move it as a whole. As a whole? Li Guodong gasped. This wasn't a tank. a plane, or a warehouse. It was a massive steel giant, intricately built and filled with immense energy. A single reactor could weigh thousands of tons, with shielding several meters thick. Yes, as a whole, Su Ran said calmly but firmly. It's the fastest, most effective, and only way to keep it intact. But, Consultant Su, the radiation. A nuclear physicist spoke in a trembling voice, fear written all over his face. Don't worry. My space doesn't follow normal physical rules. The radiation won't escape. Su Ran's tone was calm. But for safety, everyone involved in clearing and guarding the site must wear the highest level of protective gear. During the operation, the plant will be shut down to minimize risk. He turned to Li Guodong. Team Leader Li, send the order. All nuclear plants are to enter maximum alert. Clear the area, seal it off, and keep only essential technical staff. We'll start with the East Sea nuclear plant. Yes, sir. Li Guodong immediately picked up the encrypted phone and began issuing commands. 3 hours later, at the East Sea nuclear plant, the massive cooling towers rose into the clouds, surrounded by swirling steam. The reactor area was heavily secured, with armed special forces standing guard. Su Ran, wearing a thick radiation suit, walked through the restricted zone. Behind him followed Li Guodong and several chief engineers of the plant. Li Guodong and several chief engineers followed behind. Even through their masks, the cold sweat on their faces was visible. Consultant Su, this is the main body of Reactor No. 1. The chief engineer pointed at the massive structure wrapped in thick concrete and steel. His voice trembled slightly. It's about 30 meters high and more than 20 meters in diameter. Inside is a pressurized water reactor. The total weight is estimated at around 30,000 tons, not including the outer support systems and safety shell. 30,000 tons. Li Guodong's eyes narrowed. Su Ran said nothing. He walked up to the cold, rough concrete wall, removed his glove, and pressed his palm against it. In an instant, his mind surged like a rising tide. Encasing, penetrating, locking. Buzz, a dull pain struck deep in his head. This time, he felt an unprecedented resistance from the space around him. As expected, after so many containments, my mental strength is running low, Su Ran realized. He took a deep breath, focused his mind, and spread his consciousness like an invisible net, layer upon layer, wrapping around the entire reactor body. Rise. Rumble. This time, there was no instant disappearance. Instead, the ground began to shake violently. The entire nuclear island trembled as if the Earth's crust beneath it were breaking apart. Steam from the distant cooling tower roared wildly, producing a sharp, piercing sound. The soldiers stationed outside the nuclear island stared in shock at the scene before them. Under everyone's gaze, the enormous reactor body slowly began to lift off the ground, bit by bit. It was as if an invisible giant hand was pulling it straight out of its foundation. The concrete shell screeched with a harsh grinding sound as fragments and dust rained down. This is a miracle. The chief engineer covered his mouth. In his entire life, he had never imagined witnessing such a sight. Li Guodong clenched his fists so tightly that his nails nearly dug into his palms. This was one man carrying the future of a nation. Amid the violent tremors of the power plant, the reactor body finally broke free from the ground, floating in midair. With a thunderous explosion, the massive structure hanging in the air suddenly contracted, and the view twisted for an instant. Whoosh! Gone. All that remained was a deep, bottomless crater and the heavy scent of earth and steel in the air. The trembling of the nuclear power plant stopped. Everything returned to silence. Su Ran slowly lowered his hand, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. This time, the mental strain was even greater than when I emptied the military factory. Consultant Su. Li Guodong rushed forward to help him. I'm fine. Su Ran waved his hand, took a deep breath, and his sharp gaze returned. I'm used to handling things this big now. Next one. He looked at the massive crater, feeling a surge of pride. This was what it truly meant to move mountains and fill seas. Over the next 10 days, Su Ran became a tireless map cleaner. From the eastern coast to the deep mountains of the southwest, from nuclear power plants to giant hydroelectric stations. In just 10 days, more than 90% of the country's nuclear and large hydroelectric core facilities were taken by Su Ran. This not only solved the post-apocalyptic energy crisis, but also secured the nation's industrial lifeline. The Americans are getting anxious. A secret naval base on the eastern coast, underground command room. Su Ran stared at the screen, where a dozen red dots flashed rapidly. A cold smile appeared on his lips. Our movements were too big. Li Guodong pointed at the map, his voice rough but firm. Emptying the grain depots, relocating heavy industry, and especially the disappearance of nuclear plants. On satellite images, that looks like giant sinkholes. The U.S. global monitoring system isn't blind. They know something huge has happened inside our borders. Su Ran stood beside him, calm and focused. He hadn't slept much these past few days. After clearing out the inland energy cores, he was flown here by a special aircraft. The target, a batch of precision machine tools, lithography components, and tens of thousands of tons of special steel, ready for export and representing the peak of domestic manufacturing. In his previous life, these national treasures were either destroyed in the chaos or taken by foreign powers. This time, he would take them all. They don't dare act directly, Su Ran said quietly. So they disguise their ships as merchant vessels to get close and spy on us. A combat officer reported. According to intelligence, 3 ships are carrying SEALs, Special Forces, and CIA operatives. Just a bunch of clowns. Li Guodong scoffed, looking out the window. Below the large gantry crane, rows of sealed containers were neatly stacked, like soldiers waiting for inspection. Our time is running out. Su Ran looked at Li Guodong. Let's act. Delay could be dangerous. Understood. Li nodded, picked up the communicator, and his voice was calm and firm. Operation Net Closure starts now. All units, prioritize protecting Advisor Su. If anything happens to Advisor Su, I'll hold you responsible. Yes. The port was calm and peaceful. Su Ran walked alone out of the command room toward the mountain of containers. It seemed empty, with only the sound of the wind and the whirring of the crane. But Su Ran knew that behind every shadow of a container and on every high tower crane, the elite snipers of the Dragon Tooth Special Forces were lurking. This was a carefully prepared trap for unwelcome guests. He slowly approached a container labeled Precision Instruments, reached out to start securing it. Suddenly, swish, swish, swish. 3 silenced tranquilizer darts shot in a triangular pattern from 3 very tricky angles, aiming at Su Ran's back, neck, and temple. The darts were fast and deadly, a textbook example of a perfect assassination. But as the darts neared within half a meter of Su Ran, they seemed to hit an invisible wall, froze in midair, then fell weakly to the ground. Su Ran didn't even turn around. Almost at the same time. Puff, puff, puff. Faint gunshots sounded from 3 directions at the port, suppressed and forced down. Those were the Dragon Tooth snipers opening fire. 3 CIA observers, shot in the forehead, died instantly. The fight erupted in just a second. A container cover closest to Su Ran was violently kicked open. 8 SEAL team members dressed in black wetsuits, armed with MP5 submachine guns, rushed out in a line. Their guns spat fire as they indiscriminately fired at Su Ran's position. Their goal was not to kill Su Ran, but to suppress his firepower and create an opportunity for another group. Sure enough, under cover of gunfire, 4 agile black-clad figures suddenly emerged from the shadows, rushing straight towards Su Ran. Their speed exceeded normal human limits. Protect Advisor Su, Li Guodong's roar echoed through the communication channel. Suddenly, the entire port came alive. Bang, 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 bang. Dozens of remote-controlled machine gun turrets hidden nearby opened fire simultaneously. A dense rain of bullets formed a crossfire net, tearing the 8 SEAL team members into pieces. Meanwhile, a terrifying buzzing sound filled the sky. Over 100 small attack drones, like a swarm of bees, descended from above, locking onto the 4 black-clad figures with precision. 1 black-clad figure narrowly avoided 3 drones, but was caught in a high-voltage electric net sprayed by a 4th drone, convulsing and collapsing to the ground. Another black-clad figure shot down 1 drone with a gun, but was immediately hit by 7 or 8 drones charging together, exploding into a ball of fire. This was not a fight. It was a crushing defeat. This was the power of national-level industrial strength, a high-tech on small-scale special operations. Su Ran stood still the entire time, not even moving his feet. He even had time to mock, using flesh and blood to fight against technological creations. Worried about dying completely? Su Ran raised his hand, and his mental energy quickly covered the containers on the dock. Gather. Thousands of containers at the port instantly vanished into thin air. He didn't bother to look at the easily dealt with enemies. His gaze passed through the port and looked toward the distant command ship disguised as a cargo vessel. That was the real target. Su Ran raised his hand, reaching out through the void toward the ship. His mental energy instantly enveloped it. What the is that? 3 nautical miles away, inside the command room of the Victoria, Davis, the head of CIA operations in Asia, looked at the last images sent by the drone and slammed his fist the control panel. On the screen, the target simply raised his hand, and all the supplies at the port vanished instantly. What kind of power is this? Is he a god? Retreat. Immediately retreat. Davis shouted in fear. Our intelligence was wrong. This isn't a normal mission. This is not. His words suddenly stopped, because he felt the entire ship was suddenly lifted by an unstoppable force. What's happening? Report. We lost power. The ship seems to be flying. Oh my God. We're rising. We're lifting off from the sea. The crew's screams blended into a chaotic noise. Davis staggered to the porthole and saw a scene he would never forget in his life. Their 10,000-ton cargo ship was slowly rising into the air. The sea below was getting farther and farther away. Davis's whole body went cold. No. Saran watched the cargo ship struggling wildly in midair, and the smile on his face grew wider. Your ship is impressive, he whispered softly. Only he could hear. I accept it. Suddenly, his mind surged with power. Swish. The 10,000-ton giant ship disappeared into thin air. In midair, only about 100 CIA agents and Navy SEALs remained, screaming in despair as they fell into the cold sea, splashing and crashing into the water. Saran didn't bother with those who fell into the water. The Dragon Tooth team would handle them. He took a few steps forward, then was hit by a strong wave of dizziness, causing him to stagger and almost fall. This level of mental and physical strain was too much for his body to handle all at once. Special Agent Su, Li Guodong's face turned pale with fear. He rushed forward to help him. You're the future of our country. Don't push yourself too hard. I'm fine. Just a little low blood sugar. Saran waved his hand, took a deep breath, and his eyes reignited with fire. This weakness now was only to prepare him to stand tall in the end times. Clean this place up. Saran looked into the distance, where the most secretive scientific research base of the motherland was located. Next stop, Nanshaman Project, Space Center. Time. Day 20 of the Apocalypse Countdown. Juchuan, Dongfeng Space City. This place is deep in the Gobi Desert, the birthplace of Daxia aerospace industry. Right now, the entire base is under strict military control. Advisor Su, the 7th Assembly Workshop of the Southern Skygate project is just ahead. Li Guodong jumped out of the co-pilot seat and handed a coded document to Su Ran, speaking quickly. This is the current material list for the Southern Skygate project, including the verification aircraft for the Mystic Girl space fighter and the unfinished Luan Niao space mothership. Su Ran took the list, glancing over the code names, each valuable in the end times, but his expression remained calm. He nodded, his tactical boots crunching on the gravel as he stepped forward. Compared to the cold equipment, he was mainly here for one person. Let's go see over there. The group hurried through the equipment maintenance area outside. Are you brainless? Huh. A middle-aged man's angry shout echoed as a blueprint was slammed to the ground with a loud smack. I told you many times. The threshold for the hydraulic transmission system is 1,200. You changed it to 1,500, and now it's going to up. Who's responsible? Do you think you're the chief engineer? Su Ran's steps suddenly stopped. Li Guodong frowned, about to signal the guards to handle the noise. But Su Ran turned around and strode toward the workshop. Inside, the smell of oil and metal shavings filled the air. A young man, covered in oil stains, was crouched down, clutching his fists tightly. A few blueprints, marked with footprints, lay scattered at his feet. In front of him, a middle-aged man with a beer belly and a badge reading, Technical Director, was pointing at him, spitting as he yelled. Director Wong, according to fluid mechanics formulas, if we don't raise the threshold, the Cheng-Ing Powered armor will jam its knee joints during high-mobility evasive maneuvers. The young man's voice was low but firm, trembling slightly with stubbornness. Physics doesn't lie. Physics? You, a contract worker with a college diploma, are telling me about physics? Director Wong sneered coldly, his face full of muscle twitching. This is a national-level base. This is not your family's backyard where you fix tractors. You don't need to come tomorrow. Get lost. The young man suddenly looked up, his eyes red, but he clenched his teeth to stop tears from falling. He bent down, ready to pick up the blueprint on the ground. A hand reached out first and grabbed the dirty blueprints. The hand was long-fingered, with clear joints. Who told you to come in? Which department are you from? Do you understand the rules? Section Chief Wong was scolding happily when he turned his head and saw a stranger holding the blueprint. His anger grew even more. But in the next second, he seemed to be choked by a duck, and his voice suddenly stopped. Because behind this young man stood Li Guodong, the leader of the special security team from the Ministry of National Security, who often appears on the news. At this moment, Li Guodong was half a step behind the young man, with a serious look. Did you draw this blueprint? Su Ran brushed off the dust on the blueprint and looked at the young man covered in oil and dirt. The young man was stunned for a moment and nodded instinctively. Yes, I calculated it myself. Name, Lu Yuan. Hearing these words, Su Ran's expression changed slightly. Lu Yuan, the only god of machinery in the human survivor base. In his previous life, he was discovered in the 5th year of the apocalypse, when his right hand had already lost 3 fingers in an accident. The human underground fortress, Firelight City, was under attack by millions of zombies. The walls were broken, and supplies were running out. Just when everyone was hopeless, a giant mech made from abandoned mine carts, tank wrecks, and helicopter engines suddenly burst out from underground. It looked like a steel war god, fighting its way through the zombie horde, saving the last group of survivors. The pilot and creator of that mech was also called God of Machinery, Lu Yuan. And at this moment, the future God of Machinery was crouched on the ground, crying like a child over some resistance parameters. It's good that there's still time. Your calculation is very accurate. Su Ran folded the blueprint and put it into his pocket. From now on, this standard will be called Lu Yuan Threshold. Huh. Section Chief Wong came back to his senses. Although he was wary of Li Guodong, he couldn't help but interrupt. Comrade, this kid doesn't even understand the rules. These parameters are clearly against regulations. Against regulations? Su Ran turned around, his gaze as calm as if he were looking at a dead person. He didn't argue but looked at Li Guodong and said, Team Leader Li, check this Director Wong's authority. Li Guodong didn't need to check. He whispered into his earpiece and responded after 2 seconds. Wang Defa, head of the technical department, responsible for peripheral equipment maintenance, classified level C. From now on, his security level is reset to 0. Su Ran pointed at Supervisor Wang. This person has seriously neglected his duties and obstructed major national scientific projects. Find out his background. If he's not clean, let him sit in jail for a long time. Who do you think you are? Director Wang's face instantly turned pale. He shouted fiercely but with little confidence. I am a formal employee. I have an administrative rank. What right do you have? Because I am Su Ran. Su Ran didn't even look at him and simply waved his hand. 2 heavily armed Special Forces soldiers dragged Wang Defa out like dragging a dead dog. Before their screams and pleas could be heard 2 meters away, they were forcefully silenced. The entire hangar was deathly silent. Lu Yuan stared blankly at the scene, his mind completely blank. That arrogant Director Wang was gone just like that? Su Ran walked up to Lu Yuan and helped straighten his crooked collar. You're quite handy. Su Ran looked at Lu Yuan's hands, which were covered in calluses and tiny cuts. Still, okay, Lu Yuan stammered. Are you willing to come with me? Su Ran asked. Go. Where? To save the world. Su Ran grabbed Lu Yuan's oil-stained hand tightly and squeezed hard. From today, you don't need to listen to any fools. Whatever materials you need, the country will provide. Whatever you want to build, the country will let you build. Even if you want to make mechs, I'll get you nuclear fusion batteries. Lu Yuan stood there in shock, feeling a fire burning in his chest, roaring through his whole body. The gears of fate had already begun to turn in an incredible way. Nantian Gate, Assembly Workshop Number 7. The elevator shaft was bottomless. The rapid descent of the cabin created a feeling of weightlessness, making Lu Yuan grip the handrails tightly, his face pale. This depth had already exceeded 500 meters underground. Advisor Su, this was originally a secret underground nuclear shelter used for preparing for war and shortages, but it was later converted into the incubation chamber for the Southern Skygate. Li Guodong looked at the constantly flashing numbers with a deep voice. I've never been to a place like this before. Su Ran didn't speak. Instead, he took out a piece of concentrated glucose from his pocket and bit it with a snap. The sweet taste burst in his mouth, slightly easing the stabbing pain deep in his brain. After 10 days of intense containment, his mental strength was stretched to the limit, like a guitar string pulled tight and ready to snap. In his previous life, this place was the last monument of human civilization. In the first year of the apocalypse, it was breached by mutated underground worms. When the surviving soldiers arrived, they only saw ruins and the bones of many scientists. Those advanced blueprints and prototypes were buried under the yellow sand. This was the most tragic break in the Daxia technological progress. Ding! The elevator stopped, and the heavy alloy doors slid open to both sides. A cold wind rushed in, mixed with the smell of ozone and high-grade machine oil. At the end of the corridor, an old man in a wheelchair was waiting with several medical staff. The old man had a needle in the back of his hand, looked thin, but his eyes shone brightly. Cough, cough. Comrade Su, you're here. Academician Zhang. Su Ran hurried forward and slightly bowed. You should be lying in the hospital. I can't lie down. Zhang Academician looked at this overly young savior, and his hands trembled. You said the end of the world is coming, that humanity will perish. The things I made in my life, I thought they would be stored away in a museum as jokes. Now, if they can be useful, I can die in peace. Zhang Academician waved away the nurse trying to help him and turned his wheelchair to face the huge gate about 20 meters high behind him. Comrade Su Ran, do you know about the Southern Skygate project? I have some idea, Su Ran whispered. The space-based mothership Wan Bird, the high-mobility fighter Xian Nu, the tactical mech Chungying. Each one is a national treasure. Next to him, Lu Yuan suddenly looked up, his eyes nearly bulging out. Are all these just internet jokes? Could they really be true? Academician Zhang smiled bitterly. Those are just fans' romantic ideas. In reality, with current materials science and energy technology, it would take at least 50 years to build something like that. But we Daxia people have a stubborn spirit that refuses to give up. The old man pressed his palm to the fingerprint scanner. Boom. A dull hydraulic sound echoed, like a giant beast growling. The gate separating reality from science fiction slowly lifted. The bright light was blinding. Once everyone's eyes adjusted, Lu Yuan's knees buckled, and he fell to the ground with a thud. My goodness. Even Li Guodong, used to big scenes, opened his mouth wide and lost his words. In front of them was a huge underground cave, emptied out. Under the focus of many powerful searchlights, a massive steel frame, so large it was hard to breathe, lay quietly in the abyss. It was too big. It had a very aggressive wing-body fusion design, over 600 meters long, covered in a dark, wave-absorbing coating. Under the partially closed shell, many wires and complex mechanical parts were exposed. It was the strategic space aircraft platform, Wan Yao, a prototype of a space carrier built secretly over 20 years with the whole country's effort, or rather, an unhatched giant egg. This is... Lu Yuan scrambled to his feet, wanting to rush over, but hesitating, trembling all over. Is this a reserved space for a dual-cycle nuclear fusion engine? Is this a mounting point for electromagnetic railguns? Oh my, this structural design. It's clearly made for space combat. He was going crazy. This mechanical genius had completely lost his mind. It was like a child who had spent a lifetime building with Lego blocks, suddenly seeing a real starship parked in his backyard. Unfortunately, it can't fly. Academician Zhang looked at the magnificent frame with regret in his eyes. This is the last masterpiece of our generation. Because engine technology can't be advanced and energy transfer losses are too high, it's become a lifeless skeleton. The Xiannu high-mobility fighter jet has never even been tested with live ammunition. Originally, it was meant to be sealed away, waiting for technological breakthroughs 50 years from now. I can't wait 50 more years. Su Ran stepped to the edge of the viewing platform, pressing his palm against the cold railing, his eyes fixed intently on the steel skeleton. In his past life, during the late post-apocalyptic era, mutated flying creatures covered the sky. Swarm of zombie birds could easily get caught in fighter jet engines, and giant corpse vultures could crush tank tops. Losing control of the air, humans could only hide underground like mice. To counterattack, they must take back the sky, and the Lawn Bird is the only platform capable of building a moving airborne fortress on this planet. Academician Zhang, you said it lacks engines, energy, and systems. Su Ran turned to look at the old man, his tone calm but firm. What if I can provide all of that? Academician Zhang was momentarily stunned, then his breathing grew rapid. Are you saying, 1 month from now, the rules of the world will be rewritten? Technologies once thought impossible will be broken through by new crystal core technology. Su Ran pointed at Lu Yuan, who was frantically recording data. With this genius, I am confident I can make it fly. But first, I have to take them all away. Can you take them? Zhang Academician's voice trembled. He was asking about science, but also about fate. If I can't take all of them, I will take what I can. Su Ran poured the remaining half-tube of glucose into his mouth and casually tossed the empty tube aside. He took off his tactical gloves, revealing slender fingers. Li Guodong noticed Su Ran's unusual state. His face looked terrible. He hurriedly stepped forward. Consultant Su, this is more difficult than a nuclear power plant. The size is too big, and the structure is complex. Maybe you should rest for a day. No time to rest. Su Ran strode toward the massive landing gear of the Lawn Bird. Lu Yuan only then snapped out of his shock, watching Su Ran's back, and then the almost miraculous creation. His lips trembled. Is this the thing I'm supposed to fix? Su Ran took a deep breath, climbed over the railing, and jumped directly onto the maintenance platform below. He walked step by step toward the huge machine. With each step, his heartbeat quickened. This thing embodied so much effort and intricate design. Its information load was terrifying. Su Ran stood beneath the enormous prow of the Lawn Bird. Compared to this giant steel figure, he was as small as a speck of dust. Buzz. At the moment his palm touched the titanium skeleton, Su Ran's mind felt as if it was struck by a heavy hammer. Target locked. Lawn Bird Space Mothership, incomplete. Mass, 47,000 tons. Structural complexity, very high. Warning, target size too large. Mental load approaching threshold. Su Ran's vision instantly turned red, and his ears rang sharply, like nails scratching a blackboard. This was not just about weight. It was the result of the wisdom of several generations of scientists in Daxiao, built from countless nights of drawings and sweat. 2 streams of blood suddenly gushed from Su Ran's nose, staining his clothes red. Advisor Su, Li Guodong was shocked and rushed forward. Don't come any closer, Su Ran shouted loudly, his voice hoarse and frightening. He clenched his teeth tightly, blood seeping from his gums, turning his teeth crimson. Su Ran shouted silently in his mind. I can't retreat. If he retreated, humanity would truly be stuck in the mud, forever losing the sky. Let me go in. Su Ran's eyes widened suddenly, and his mental power, like a flood, poured out recklessly, forcibly wrapping around the huge object. The space twisted. In the eyes of Academician Zhang, Li Guodong, and Lu Yuanjin, who were all shocked, the 600-meter-long, mountain-like, Lawn Bird, Space Mothership, along with the surrounding, Xiannu, fighters and mech production lines, began to become illusory. Suddenly, they shrank into a black dot and disappeared into thin air. Boom! A loud sound, as if coming from the depths of the soul, caused the entire underground base to shake violently. A huge pressure difference instantly formed a gale, sweeping dust and drawings into the air, flying everywhere. It was empty. The originally crowded underground abyss now felt so empty that it was unsettling, leaving only a few lonely support beams, looking especially desolate. Thud! Su Ran's legs buckled, and he fell backward. Advisor Su, Li Guodong, like a cheetah, rushed over and caught him just before he hit the ground. At this moment, Su Ran's orifices bled. His face was as pale as paper, as if he had just crawled out of a pile of corpses. How are you? Are you okay? Military doctor. Call the military doctor quickly. Li Guodong shouted until his voice was hoarse, with red eyes. Su Ran trembled as he clumsily wiped the blood from his face and barely opened his eyes. I'm fine, just a bit weak. He looked at Professor Zhang, who was already crying heavily. The old man stared at the empty base, which was his life's work, like watching his child being taken away. Professor Zhang, Su Ran's voice was weak but firm. I have taken your child. One day, I will make it equipped with a full nuclear fusion engine and a particle cannon. I will make it fly to the heavens, becoming the Noah's Ark for all the people of Daxia. Before he finished speaking, Su Ran tilted his head and completely fainted. The scene was silent, only the urgent beeping of medical equipment. Professor Zhang shakily stood up, took off his glasses, and wiped his blurry tears with his sleeve. Tears streamed down his face. At this moment, ignoring the medical staff's protests, he shakily got out of his wheelchair and bowed deeply towards Su Ran, who was unconscious. Please, this bow was not for a deity. It was for those who carry humanity forward. Time. Day 18 of the Apocalypse Countdown. It's unclear how long passed. Su Ran woke up amid intense jostling. He felt as if he had been disassembled and reassembled, his head heavy as if filled with lead. You're awake? You're awake. Director, he's awake. A joyful shout came from nearby. Su Ran struggled to open his eyes. The first thing he saw was the narrow ceiling of a helicopter cabin. A hanging drip was beside him, with a needle inserted into the back of his hand. Li Guodong's stubbly face leaned over, his bloodshot eyes even more prominent. You scared me to death. Li Guodong let out a sigh, handing him a thermos cup. You were unconscious for 24 hours. If your brain waves weren't still stable, I'd be ready to apologize with my life. Su Ran wanted to sit up, but found he had no strength at all. Don't move around. Li Guodong held him down. The doctor said you're suffering from severe mental exhaustion and need rest. What day is it? Su Ran opened her mouth, her throat dry and rough as if she had swallowed 2 handfuls of gravel. June 27th, Li Guodong said in a deep voice. There are 18 days left until the date you mentioned. 18 days. Su Ran closed her eyes briefly, sensing the space of her consciousness. That huge, Luan bird was quietly floating in the void, surrounded by supplies as tall as mountains. This time, her effort was not in vain. Where are Zhang Lao and the others? They've all moved. According to your plan, the core team has been evacuated to the Ark base in the northwest. Li Guodong looked complicated. That young man named Lu Yuan refuses to leave. He insists on staying with you, saying he wants to watch you release that big thing. Su Ran chuckled softly. Let him stay? That's his future wife. He struggled to lean back in his chair, looking out the window. The helicopter's blades cut through the cold wind of the Kunlun Mountains. This place is the ancestor of China's dragon veins, the spiritual center of the mountains. Outside the window, the once desolate Gobi Desert was now witnessing a miracle in human engineering history. Tens of thousands of excavators and bulldozers, like diligent worker ants, were working wildly among the winding mountains. Dust was being forcibly suppressed by windproof nets, and the beams of searchlights pierced the night sky like sieves. This was originally a nuclear weapons storage site left over from the third-line construction in the 1960s. Now, it's the site for the first phase of the Peach Blossom Spring project, which also includes 11 other large safe zones. Li Guodong pointed to a huge in the mountain below, his tone filled with pride. After the first phase of the Peach Blossom Spring project started, engineering troops worked around the clock, hollowing out the entire mountain. In terms of defense, even if a hydrogen bomb with a 1 million ton yield exploded overhead, the people inside could still be playing cards. Su Ran nodded. In her previous life, this was indeed one of the strongest surviving strongholds. Unfortunately, back then, there were no supplies or production lines. It was just a solid tomb. The helicopter began to descend, and suddenly, the cliff ahead split open, revealing a massive cave entrance large enough for 2 Boeing 747s to fly side by side. Entering the cave, everything suddenly opened up. It was a giant underground city, a vast cavern. The ceiling soared hundreds of meters high, and thousands of high-brightness industrial lamps lit the place as brightly as daytime. But the problem was obvious: emptiness. It was unbelievably empty. Aside from the basic ventilation pipes and the still-setting concrete walls, this massive fortress meant to hold 1 million people, looked like an unfinished building. Half an hour later, 600 meters underground. The air here was thin, mixed with the smell of wet cement and the faint scent of explosives. It was a huge underground cavern, over 300 meters high and large enough to fit half a county. This place was shaped by nature over millions of years, then expanded by human blasting into a top-secret shelter. At the moment, apart from a few newly poured support pillars, the place felt eerily empty. Oldly, did you bring the people? A strong man in a camouflage vest, covered in dust, strode over. He was Zhao Jianjun, the chief engineer, with 2 bars and 4 stars on his shoulder, and right now he looked extremely anxious. Oldly, I've been waiting for you to bring them. General Zhao Jianjun, commander of the Peach Blossom Base, was known for his fiery temper. I'll be honest, no one can work without materials. Look at this place, it's empty. Where are the production lines? The machines? The raw materials? There are only 18 days left before that so-called Red Ring. What do you expect the soldiers to do? Dig with shovels? I brought the person you asked for. Li Guodong pointed to Su Ran. This is Advisor Su. Zhao Jianjun froze for a moment, staring at the pale young man before him. His brows furrowed deeply. This one, he looks too weak to even lift a brick. Su Ran didn't speak. He simply listened quietly. He understood Zhao Jianjun's frustration. Under normal circumstances, this task did seem impossible. Lu Yuan. Su Ran suddenly spoke. The timid young man following behind him straightened up. Why yes, if it were you, and you had all the equipment and power you needed, how long would it take to get this place running? Lu Yuan looked around the vast space. The fear in his eyes faded, replaced by a spark of excitement only a true engineer could have. His mind was racing quickly, and his fingers moved in the air as if drawing lines. If it's a ready-made production line like the Dragon's Nest, plus that nuclear power plant reactor. As long as I place it accurately, give me 3 days. I can connect the lines and make it work. Who can't boast about that? Zhao Jianjun glared at Lu Yuan irritably. Where's the equipment? Did it fall from the sky? Su Ran smiled. He unscrewed his thermos cup, took a sip of wolfberry water, and moistened his dry throat. Clear the area. Su Ran's voice was quiet but echoed through the empty cave. All personnel from Zone A to Zone F, evacuate. Leave enough space. Also, have the Foundation load-bearing team ready. There will be a little shaking. Zhao Jianjun wanted to say something, but was stopped by Li Guodong. Old Zhao, no more talk. Listen to him. Li Guodong looked serious. Follow the orders. 10 minutes later, the core area was cleared. Only Su Ran stood on the vast cement ground, like a barren plain. A spotlight shone on him, casting his shadow very long. Everyone was on the distant viewing platform, holding their breath and watching closely. Su Ran closed his eyes, his consciousness sinking into that endless space. There, quietly floating, was the treasure he had gathered over the past half-month, scoured from most of Daxia. Come out. Su Ran suddenly opened his eyes, one hand pressing against the ground. Boom, without warning, without a process. The air was violently compressed in an instant, producing a deafening explosion. A visible shockwave radiated outward from Su Ran, sweeping around, making people far away squint. Next, Zhao Jianjun felt his materialist worldview shatter. The originally empty Zone A factory suddenly filled with a 1.5-kilometer-long steel dragon. Zone A Dragon's Nest, in position, Su Ran waved his hand to the left. Swish. A continuous 1-kilometer-long assembly line for J-20 fighters, along with hundreds of precision robotic arms and unfinished aircraft parts, instantly covered the entire left hollow. Zone B Thunderbolt Warehouse, in position, on the right side. Countless neatly stacked missile racks and ammunition boxes appeared out of thin air like dominoes, filling the armory area instantly. This it. Zhao Jianjun tightly gripped the railing, his knuckles turning white, eyes nearly bulging out. What kind of black technology is this? Quantum teleportation? Or some kind of magic flying machine? Li Guodong took a deep breath. Although he had seen similar scenes many times, the scale of this creation still made his scalp tingle. Area C, Energy Group, hum. The ground slightly sank, the weight of tens of thousands of tons causing the earth to groan. It was the number 3 reactor unit from the East Sea nuclear power plant, uprooted completely. Thick lead layers, Complex pipes, towering cooling systems. Like magic, they fit perfectly onto the prepared foundation. Although still sealed, the heavy industrial feel excited the nuclear physics experts present, making them tremble with anticipation. Finally, Su Ran looked up. He gazed at the deep pit area originally reserved to hold the enormous equipment, now reaching 100 meters deep. His face grew paler, warm liquid again seeping from his nose, but his smile became more wild. Little Su, don't hold on anymore. Li Guodong watched Su Ran sway dangerously, his palms sweaty with anxiety. He wished he could rush over and carry him down. Su Ran stood in the center of the site, blood again flowing from his nose, but he ignored it. He had to hold on. Last, Luan bird, return to the nest. Su Ran howled to the sky, suddenly raising both hands high. At this moment, everyone felt suffocated. The entire underground base seemed to be swallowed by darkness. A huge, despair-inducing black shadow appeared out of nowhere beneath the 300-meter-high underground sky. It was the Luan bird, a ship 600 meters long, gleaming with cold metal, floated silently for half a second before crashing down. The massive landing gear struck the specially reinforced ground, producing a thunderous clang of metal on metal. The entire Kunlun mountain seemed to tremble at this moment. Dust settled. The originally empty and desolate underground cavern was now filled with steel. The nuclear reactor emitted a faint blue glow, indicator lights on the production line flickered, and the ancient beast-like space carrier stood proudly in the center, overlooking the tiny humans below. This is a miracle of industry. It is also Noah's Ark for the end times. Cough, cough. Su Ran wobbled, as if all his strength had been drained, and he fell straight back. How are you? I'm okay. Not dead. Su Ran wiped his nosebleed, showing a weak but proud smile. He turned to look at Lu Yuan and Zhao Jianjun, who had already turned to stone in place. Commander Zhao, the equipment has arrived. Su Ran pointed to the valley filled with heavy national treasures. The rest of the construction work is up to you. Then he looked at Lu Yuan, pointing at the Luan bird. Lu Yuan, trembling all over, stepped down the stairs. He seemed like a pilgrim, walking slowly toward the huge battleship. He reached out to touch the cold landing gear, tears silently falling, then turned into wild laughter. Ha! Everything is here. All the parts. This is art. This is a masterpiece. Lu Yuan suddenly turned around, eyes red, as if possessed, shouting at Su Ran. Give me energy. Give me control. As long as I have enough materials, I can make it fly. I want to install a nuclear fusion engine. I want to turn it into the most terrifying war machine in the world. Anything to satisfy you, Su Ran replied. At this moment, the future god of machines was gradually awakening deep in the Kunlun Mountains. Time, end of the world countdown, day 17. Location, Chinese land, 12 super safe zones under construction. If the previous material transfer was moving mountains, then now the scene is changing the sky and the earth. Once the national machinery runs at full power, the force it unleashes will make even gods tremble.